I'm a defense attorney, right? Going to trial is what I got into the business for. There is nothing I enjoy more than arguing a case in front of the jury. It's really just helping people out. People find themselves judged on their worst day.
It's one thing to support law enforcement. It's another thing to give them unlimited authority. We're talking about government overreach.
Unfortunately, you get in today's society especially, it's got to be one way or the other. So either pro-police or anti-police. What gets me frustrated and what I struggle with, especially when I take a case to trial, is are you pro-police? Absolutely. If something's happened, I want to be able to call the police. But what the problem is, you're pro-police, but then they're never wrong. They make mistakes like everybody else. But just because I said this particular officer got this wrong doesn't mean that now we got to eliminate the police.
Innocent until proven guilty is a myth. Do you think it's an overreaction or not?
Turn the lights down. Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you.
The only garbage I see floating out there is just supporters.
Greetings, loyal ladies and gentlemen of the Garbage Gang. Welcome to another episode of Mike G and the Garbage Gang podcast. Remember, if you want to be a member of the Garbage Gang, we need you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We've got a very long overdue guest in studio with us here today. I've been fighting back to back with this gentleman for over a decade in court. He is my partner in crime, Richard Roberts. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, finally. Long overdue, I hear. Huh?
I spoke to one of our clients very recently, and he was asking about how we started working together. And I told him we started the same firm, and I kind of explained the fact that whether it were a street fight or a legal battle, you're the guy in my life that I want at my side because we've got each other's backs, and he really appreciated that.
No, I'd agree. I think everybody knows, and I think my wife even knows, if I get in some trouble, you're the guy to call. I'm like, it's all right, just call Mike.
Do you think that your background in combat sports, being a boxer, really sparked your interest in fighting in court?
Yeah, I think it's the competition thing. I played sports all, growing up. Did, combat sports, boxing. My father put me in that, said it would teach me how to be a man. I don't know how true that was, but okay. I was like, so you want me to get punched in the face? Although I did realize people who do combat sports for a living, God bless them, because, I was like 16 years old. I'm like, I've definitely better ways to make a living than doing this. But, I did football and basketball and ran track, and it was always competition. Unfortunately, didn't have the, we'll say, body size or body type to do it professionally, but I love the competition. So getting into court and being able to fight for clients every day it's what I do. It gives me that adrenaline when I get to walk into court and like, all right, who's going to be better at this, me or you? That's really what it is.
Do you think that you learned a lot of valuable lessons from boxing growing up?
Yeah, because you got to get up. I don't care how good or strong or big you are, you're going to get hit. And I'll never forget, I was 13 years old and I was sparring and my father's in the corner. He's like, all right, get serious. And I'm like, okay. And I don't think I knew what that was. And then I remember the guy across from me is a couple years older. He hit me with a feint, and I leaned to the left to try to get out of the way, and I leaned right into a left. And I remember looking up at the ceiling, and my father's looking over. He's like, so you're going to get up? And yeah, that was it. And I think that's, that's why I say football's the same way. It's like, you're going to get up because you're going to get, I don't care how good you are, you're going to get knocked down. Do you get up? And I think the same applies when we go to court. Like the prosecutor's going to have some good shots. Or if I do children and youth case, my client's going to do something, they're going to point out a fact. It's just, okay, what do we got to do?
There are challenges in every case. There's
Absolutely.
No perfect fact patterns.
No, there's definitely not. And if you find one, you can send it my way because I'd like that. But no, there is no perfect fact pattern. There's going to be bad facts in every single case. A colleague goes, they're not the best facts for your case. I've said that in every single one of my cases. Those are not the best facts for your case.
We got to have him on. We were doing a CLE, and what happened was a gentleman in the audience ran by this terrible, terrible fact pattern. I think it was something along the lines of, what if you're defending a client who used force, and they tell you that they were scared because the person was a certain color?
Yeah.
And our colleague, attorney Brett Regal, said, this is one of the situations where you have to be frank with your client and tell him these are not the greatest facts for your case. And we all immediately laughed and we bring that up. So when did you realize that basketball was going to be the sport that you'd pursue in college?
Oh, when I did basketball, I don't know. It's just one I was the best at. It was fun. I enjoyed it. And, you know, it was something I wanted to continue to do. I just wish I was your height, Mike.
Didn't you place very high, though, in track sports?
Yeah. Yeah, I could jump. That's probably what it led to basketball. I did high jump and sprinting in high school. I didn't do that in college. But, yeah, it was yeah.
You were ranked pretty high in the state, though, right? Yeah. I know you for over 10 years, and modest usually isn't one of the words I'd use to describe you.
I could be fast. Yeah, I was pretty fast. Did state track finals and stuff like that. But yeah, it was something I really, really enjoyed. It was tough to lose it, and I think anybody who played sports, even if you did it through high school, that when you went through it, the last time you do it is kind of depressing. It's one of those few times I can remember in my life literally crying, like, because you'd never, frankly, you'll never do this again. So.
And then you could dunk a basketball at your size.
I could dunk a basketball. Not anymore. I'm a smidge older than when I was then. If I tried to dunk a basketball now, I'd be calling Mike to carry me to the hospital. You'd have to really stretch out. But yeah, it was quite enjoyable. I think it gave me something to do. It gave me some focus. It was tough to let it go. But, I was only 6 foot tall. I wasn't 6'3".
Kind of like boxing, do you think that playing collegiate sports and that level of competition and the discipline that it takes, no matter what level you're at, did that contribute to shaping who you are as a human being?
It did. It kept me grounded. It makes sure you're disciplined. You only have so many hours in a day. I tell people all the time, I think discipline's important and focus is important. And if you have limited time, it helps better. I tell everybody when I went to law school, I didn't go to law school right out of college. And when I finally went back to law school, I had a full-time gig. I had worked. So, and what happened with the focus in that situation is it limited my time. So I only had so much time to do homework. And I think I did better in law school than I did in college. And I think the lack of free time, not that that's not free time isn't important, but that focus and that drive. Plus I knew what was out there. So this is what I wanted to do. So it's not, something where you come out 21 years old going to law school. Some people can handle it. I don't know if I could have, to be completely honest. When I went and had 2 years out in the workforce, I'm like, this is something I wanted to do.
Why do you think some people wouldn't be able to handle, or you don't know if you would be able to handle it?
It's a free time thing. Did I really want to do it? I didn't have a taste of real life yet. I went to high school, then to college, and I don't know if I had that same kind of focus when I graduated from college. And when I was in college, frankly, probably had a little too much fun.
How many years was it that you were in the workforce before you went to law school?
So I graduated, what did I do? 2014, graduated in 2005, 2010, like 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a taste of real life.
Yeah,
and
real responsibility.
Paying bills.
Yeah. And I also, did my thing where I had my oldest daughter. So, with children, I got a 23-year-old and then I have a 23-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old. So as I tell people when I tell them, I was like, I'll let you guess which ones were planned and which one wasn't.
19 years old, you're a dad, right?
19 years old. She just graduated from Penn State. She's got a job in some biochemistry lab, so I'm not going to ask what that does. She's much smarter than me. I tried to catch her to law school. She keeps saying no. So, only half my brain hopes she fails at this job and then she listens to me. And then we could have another partner in a law firm there, buddy. But no, she's like the light of my life. So that also, kind of grounds you. So it was something important to me, and to make sure, she did the things that she was supposed to do, and she has. So
there's a lot of responsibility for a 19-year-old raising a kid, isn't it?
It was more responsibility for her mother. I'll give mom credit on that one. But yeah, it was. It's something, you have another person you're responsible for at 19 years old. And don't get me wrong, I went out and had a lot of fun, but at the same point, you had responsibilities at home, which I think helped.
So at what point do you realize that you want to get into criminal defense?
Honestly, it's what I came out to do. I mean, the reason I went to law school is my wife. She pushed me, thought I wasn't doing what I should have done, thought my potential was there. She pushed me to go. I finally went, and criminal defense, just the competition, I think. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of negotiation. You're well aware of that. but the competition and trying to, I just, people who don't have a lot, I think it's a lot where I came from. And I see a lot of those people are people I grew up with, people like I grew up with, and, helping those people out of a jam is something that I enjoy doing, right? It's really just helping people out. I really enjoy that. It's a lot. People find themselves judged on their worst day. I've represented some bad people, but a lot of people, it's just had a really bad day. It's their worst day. And to help them get out of that situation, see a way forward is important for me.
What do you think of that feeling where somebody's in that tough spot and they're in trouble, that you come to save the day? Is that a feeling that you love?
I don't know if save the day, but getting them calm. I think when we get to a situation where they call the office, they're upset, they got these papers in the mail, the police knocked on the door, they got arrested, and I take a 30, 45-minute conversation with them, and they're like, I feel a whole lot better. That makes me happy. Saving the day is probably a little tough. Definitely not Superman, but I think calming them, understanding that I got their back, we're going to work through this, trying to get them to not think and stress about it, even though it's easier said than done, because thinking and stressing and doing stuff is not going to change anything. It's just going to give you health problems. And tell them, like, I got your back, call me if you need anything, send me an email. We're going to work through this. That's important.
I don't think save the day is an overstatement, though, because I've been doing cases with you for over a decade, and I can think in my head multiple examples of clients who looked at you at the end of their case, whether it's a CYS case or a criminal case, and very genuinely told you saved my life. And you know that that's true.
I try to be modest.
For the first time in
history.
For
the first time in history.
Turn over a new leaf here.
I'm trying. No, it's not. But no, I don't want to think of myself that way. I try to keep a little humility in that. I mean, I am. I tell everybody I'm the best attorney in Pennsylvania, bar none. I'll take a Pepsi challenge on that. Yeah. Me and another one of our colleagues argue about that all the time. He's out in the West Coast. I'll have to spend, or the western part of the state. And I'll spend some time with him in the beginning of November. But, so I'm sure there'll be an interesting dinner. We're going to invite you out.
That sounds good. So when you are involved in these cases where somebody's life on the line, is that a type of pressure that you thrive under, being a former athlete?
Yeah, I think it is. It's because what am I going to do to make their life better, right? Because for a lot of these people, and a lot of the cases I do, you can spend the rest of your life in prison. And it's a lot of pressure, but I enjoy that. I mean, it's really me against them. And then when I talk about it, one of the things that people get scared of, and I enjoy, although I'm not the person named, it's, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the United States of America versus the client. And the fact that I have the entire weight of the government, whether it be federal or state, against me, I'm like, yeah, I got you. There's nothing you could do. I'm going to take it. And it's the competition. I have to find a way to make this work. Good facts, bad facts, you got to dig through it, and you got to go and going over this thing and the attention to detail and what did I miss? And there's got to be something here, and putting that piece of that puzzle together to be able to tell the story of why your client did something in a self-defense case or how your client didn't do it. In CYS cases, it's excruciatingly difficult because we run into cases where they're like, well, maybe you should have done it this way. I'm like, well, my client doesn't need to do it that way. And my thing I say all the time is just because you would do something differently doesn't mean what my client did was wrong. I mean, in CYS cases, it drives me up a wall because, I'm big on parental rights and, the way you raise your children absent, you can't, I don't want you to, starve the kids or beat the kids unnecessarily. It's just, outside of that, the parent has the right to raise the kids as they see fit. The CYS may say, no, I wouldn't do it that way. And frankly, I've been in situations where I'm like, I don't know if I do it that way. But again, I'm going to defend your right to do it that way. Just because if my son or daughter was in the same situation, I'd go left where you went right, doesn't mean going right's the wrong direction, right?
And is government overreach something that's always bothered you?
Yes, that does.
From the time that you were young?
Like, there's certain things. Government's important. Don't get me wrong. It needs to be there. It serves a function. But when it comes to those personal decisions like that, that's something you have to stay out of. If it's a decision that's personal, it's in the family, it's personal, what are you doing? Why are you here? Right? You have no point. It's not illegal. Again, kids getting abused or starved or locked in a cage in the basement. That's why the government comes there. That's illegal. You shouldn't be able to do that. But if I want to parent my children and do this as opposed to this, okay.
Is that also what drives you with the criminal defense stuff, is government overreach? Because a lot of people who are on the right will typically be pro-police, or they'll say they're pro-police. I don't know that they necessarily understand what they mean by that. But it's one thing to support law enforcement, and people want the police to show up when something bad happens. It's another thing to give them unlimited authority. We're talking about government overreach. And I think people have to really recognize the distinction.
Right. And it's important because, unfortunately, you get in today's society, especially, you get very, it's got to be one way or the other, right? So either pro-police or anti-police. Well, I'm a defense attorney, right? So I could be pro-police because if they're not doing their job, I don't have any clients, right? But what I mean is what gets me frustrated and what I struggle with, especially when I take a case to trial, is, are you pro-police? Absolutely. If something's happened, I want to be able to call the police, they show up the front door and handle the business, right? But what the problem is you look at you're pro-police, but then they're never wrong. And that's the problem that I have, right? Or, friends on the left, they're anti-police. They're always wrong. Well, no, because if somebody's robbing your house, you want to call the police and they want them to show up. So don't give me this anti-police stuff. But at the same time, you can be pro-police. I want them to be there. You got to support them. They have a dangerous job. Don't get me wrong. But they lie, cheat, and steal like everybody else. They make mistakes like everybody else. They get things wrong. They arrest the wrong guy. In closing arguments, I'm like, is this police officer bad? No. Good cop. I'm sure he's got a great family. He's got kids in college. But you know what? He got this one wrong. This person didn't do that. He arrested the wrong guy. Does it make him a bad person? No. Am I going to sit here and protest and, cancel the police or defund the police? No. But he got that one wrong, or that cop went too far, or that's an excessive use of force. You have to be able to call those things out. But just because I said this particular officer got this wrong, or he, took it too rough with this particular client of mine, doesn't mean that now we got to eliminate the police. So,
and some of them do very bad things. Obviously, just like any profession, there are lawyers who do very bad things. Any profession, you're going to find that. But aside from somebody who's intentionally doing something bad, you say if they got it wrong, it doesn't make them bad. It doesn't mean they're always wrong. It makes them human, is what it makes them.
Right.
And unless you're going to contend that police officers are not human, then their logic really won't stand up, will it?
I agree. And I think it's important. And it's tough as a defense attorney because, we're attacking the police when I'm in court. And it's tough for, depending on, especially where you are in the state, you come off too harsh. They're like, he's this defense guy's attacking. I was like, no, he makes a mistake. Is he a good father? I'm sure he is. I don't know. But, is he a good person? If I saw him at the bar, it's just the way it is. And we all have jobs to do. And sometimes they get things once. One of my favorite stories when it comes to that, I had a case, it was in the eastern part of Northampton County. And the ADA, the officer, we do this like 4-day long trial, right? And we're like at each other's throats and we're going at it. And we're, and the jury ends up splitting the baby, right? So split the baby, which is fine. So there's a restaurant down at the bottom of the hill from the courthouse. And after the trial's over, me, the ADA, was assigned to the case, and the officer go to dinner after the trial. We're just, laughing and joking around. And a couple people come up and say, hey, can we talk to you? And I have no idea who these people are, which is terrible because I've been staring at them for 4 days, but I didn't realize it was two of the jurors. And like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, we're just, having dinner. He's like, you guys did really well, blah, 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 blah. They want to talk about the case and, our jobs and stuff. He's like, I got to ask you guys something. He's like, I didn't expect to see you guys all here. And I go, well, what do you mean? And they go, well, I thought you guys hated each other. You guys were yelling and screaming. And when I told them, I was like, what's interesting about that is I have nothing personally against either of them. And if you think back about what I said, I never said the ADA was a terrible human being or the cop. I said, he didn't finish an investigation. Why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you? I attacked his case. I don't attack him. And that's really what it comes down to. When I'm in court, I'm never attacking the cop personally. 99%. I have because I think there are some bad ones, but I've never attacked them personally. I attacked their case. You're human beings. You made a mistake. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means maybe you should have done more in this particular case. And I think it's an important way to point it out.
There are cases, though, where they're intentionally misleading, intentionally doing the wrong thing, where it does bring it to that next level. And that's you really have to try to control that because you don't want it to become personal. You want to be able to do your job as best as possible.
Unless it is personal, they're intentionally misrepresenting something because I have no problem calling that out.
Yeah.
And you don't either. And which is why when you saw your face, you put your finger up. I'm like, you're right, not 100%. We're going to go like 95%. We've been in cases where like, this guy is something else.
Yeah. Now, when you were talking about the people you grew up with, tell us a little bit about what that was like.
My mother sees it, she'll be mad at me. But we didn't grow up with much of anything. My mom worked her butt off to give us everything we could. I wasn't in terrible circumstances, but we're, inner city kids, went to an inner city school. And the issue is those individuals come with it a disadvantage. And that's something I carry with me at all. And I have a soft spot for those people. The ability for them to try to get out of that is tougher than people who don't come from that realize. And I think that gives me a soft spot for those kind of people. I think the interesting thing is how police look at those kind of people, which always gives me suspicious avenues. And I think it gives me that soft spot and that drive to defend that sort of situation as I do today.
Did that also somehow play a role in you becoming a gun owner when you were of age, having the ability to protect yourself?
Well, yeah, you saw bad things, bad neighborhood. I think it does. You understand the ability that you need to have to protect yourself and to protect your family in that situation. Although growing up in those neighborhoods, sometimes I didn't really fear it. It was people from outside the neighborhood that made it a little worse, to be honest.
But being in the city, obviously you're in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So it's not like you had the laws that we had in New York where I didn't know any gun owners. Did you know gun owners?
Yeah.
Legal gun owners?
Yes, I do legal gun owners as well. A lot of the neighbors. Yeah.
What was that exposure like? Was it positive, negative, or
it
sort
was
of neutral?
Positive. Yeah. It was positive and negative. You understood the difference. I mean, my father was a Vietnam vet, so he didn't like guns. So there was no guns in my particular house growing up. But we got exposed to it. I think the first time I did when I had my own apartment. I knew it from legal gun owners. I went shooting with some of the neighbors. My uncle was a big hunter, although that was not my thing. I did not hunt. I remember that was, God bless the hunters. I'm not a nature guy growing up in the city. We went hunting and it was crack of dawn. We're just going to lay there. I'm like, so what's going to happen? We're just going to sit here and wait. Wait for what? Something to walk by. I'm like, how long do I got to do that? I'm like, all day. I'm like, why am I doing this all day? It's cold and I'm wet. I don't know if I want to do that.
And I'm tired.
I'm like, you got me up early. I don't know what we're doing here. But yeah, with legal gun owners, it was important. Like you saw a lot of the people and they weren't, a lot of people I have didn't show off too much, which is why maybe I get little standoffish people who walk around open carry. Not that there's anything illegal, but you know the guy I'm talking about that's just trying to show off. That drives me insane. Like, what are you doing? Right? Because we're not here to frighten people or make people nervous. And I think that's, like we talked about police officers. There's a lot of law-abiding gun owners. A lot of them I can appreciate. Some people are very law-abiding. They bother me because I think they take it a different way. I'm not here to intimidate. I'm really here to protect myself and my family, not to really show off.
Didn't your dad, with his combat experience, also teach you a valuable lesson regarding the importance of avoiding confrontation, if at all possible?
Yeah. I think this is from you, is the best gunfight is the one you don't get into, right? And one of the things when you and I teach seminars, I tell people to pay attention to your surroundings, right? And I said, most when you become a victim of a crime, 99% of or 95% of the crimes is they're looking for opportunity. If you got to work for it, they don't really want to do that, right? So I was like, best defense is cross the street. Right. I say, we learned that growing up in the city. Like if you're in the corner and I'm walking towards the corner, I see two guys and looking at me and I'm looking at them and I'm like, I don't want. Do I have every right to walk through them? Absolutely. You have every right to do so. Am I walking through them? No. You know what I'm doing? I'm crossing the street, walking and crossing over. Is that a pain in the neck? Yeah, but I'd rather do that than try to get in a confrontation where, I could end up seriously injured, right? Just because you might be defending yourself lawfully doesn't mean you're not going to end up dead.
Didn't Dad also talk about the lasting impact that it had on him to have to participate in combat?
Yeah. So, my father struggled with PTSD. Granted, he's a Vietnam vet, so PTSD was just like, suck it up cupcake. Right. And he struggled with that, for his whole life. And he couldn't imagine a more justified circumstance than that. And, he used to, when he talked about it, which wasn't often, talked about faces and 8 people that he can remember. I don't know how many more, but there was 8 people, and struggled with them all his life. I don't want to be in that situation unless I absolutely have to. And even when he had to, you're going to struggle with it because you're not supposed to. I don't think we're meant to take another human being's life.
I think a lot of people underestimate the impact that you're going to have moving forward if, God forbid, you do have to protect yourself or your loved ones.
Yeah, and I think people completely underestimate that. They think, it's like a movie, and then I'm going to be fine. I'm the hero. This guy was threatening me. I'm good to go. And, well, you and I could tell stories about clients that we had where it, completely justified, end up with either a very positive and not guilty verdict. They're still messed up. And because, you're in that situation, you took another human being's life. I don't think people realize how dramatic that can be.
There are no winners in those cases, is the way I like to describe it, unfortunately.
Yeah, there isn't. Like, you get a complete not guilty verdict, go home, complete vindication. You're going to need therapy. And if you don't think you do, I think you've never been in a situation like that before.
So let's go back to the beginning of your legal career. You had been at the McShane firm in Harrisburg while you were in law school.
That's correct.
How'd you find them?
They put an advertisement out, and I applied for it. I went in with Kurt, and Kurt was like, yeah, we think this is a good guy. And they offered me a job, and I kind of stayed there.
And you were involved in some pretty significant cases before you were even an attorney, right?
Yeah, the first case I was ever involved in was James Hugney, who had been in jail for murdering his son, setting fire. He set his house. Well, the allegation was he set his house on fire. His son was in there. He killed his son. He had literally been in jail longer than I had been alive at that point. And we filed a petition. The boss had me look at it, and I said, I think we got some issues here. And, it started when I was a law clerk. It was two years before I graduated. And it finished a year and a half after I was licensed as an attorney, where we got him freed after a wrongful conviction. He was convicted in 1976. I wasn't even alive at that point.
And was it 14 or 15 that we got him out?
15. Yeah, because I was licensed at 14. It was the beginning of next year. Because I remember it being cold. We were out there waiting for him to get released. Cold. It was freezing. It was freezing. And we could tell a story how we met in the McShane firm. I love this story. I gotta tell the story. I gotta tell the story. So you come into the office and they're like, hey, you got this new guy, we're gonna do gun law. I'm like, we don't need no new guy. So I come over here, and then I was like, I come in your office, you're like, hi, I'm Mike Jeremy. He's all professional, right? You're all professional. Like, this is real buttoned up. I'm like, get out of here. We're not doing this. So I go, he's like, I'm Mike Jeremy. It's nice to meet you. I was like, yeah. I heard you're a new gun guy. Like, yeah, I'm going to be doing some of that stuff. I'm like, sorry, GPA is pretty good. And he goes, not as good as mine. I think I got a couple of tenths of a point on you. He's like, and he goes, yeah, but you went to Widener. And I was like, we're getting along just fine. I like this guy. I think I walked over. Kurt's like, so what do you think? I'm like, we're getting along just fine. I like this guy. I said this. He busted my chops right back. I'm like, we're fine. We're perfect.
Yeah, that moment is burned into my brain.
It is.
Forever, because that was like the origin story of the Justice Brothers.
No,
right?
It was. And I looked over. Kurt's like, so what do you think? I was like, we're getting along just fine. He's perfect.
And when you think about the magnitude of some of the cases that we worked together in our first year in practice together, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
We look at suing the city of Harrisburg for their illegal gun ordinances and getting those ordinances suspended. When you look at the case we had in Center County where we're litigating, where the opponent
is the judge,
is a sitting judge in the county, and his counsel consists of partners
at one of the biggest law firms in Harrisburg.
Law firms in central Pennsylvania who have been doing this for 25 years, and we've been doing it for under 6 months.
Right. And Justin's like, hey, you two handle this. We're like, wait, what? Wait, what am I supposed to do again?
Yeah, but after a few minutes of that, we're like, rock and roll. Let's do this.
Yeah. Your cross-examination of the judge was priceless.
Yeah.
It was priceless. I loved it.
And to his credit, he never took anything personally.
Nope.
And he was a perfect gentleman anytime I saw him outside of that courtroom.
I know. I've been in front of him for other cases after that, and I'm always sitting there going, oh, man, this is going to be bad. Does he remember me? I'm like, I wasn't the guy standing up. I was trying to pull him down, Judge. I wasn't questioning you. I was telling him to calm down. You were a judge.
It's my fault, right?
It's his fault.
I was in court not terribly long after that with a client where we got her into ARD.
Mm-hmm.
And I get in, they got us all in the one courtroom, how they do it in that county. And judge comes in, it's him for the ARD acceptance. And he's calling one by one the different cases for everybody to stand up. And I'm like, can I hide and have my client just stand up? So calls us, we stand up. counselor approached the bench. I'm like, my client's going to get the chair. Getting ready to get set up for ARD. She's going to have no conviction, get her record expunged. Now she's getting the chair. I go up and he just said, listen, I just want you to understand that, there will never be any personal feelings or anything like that. And I had to do what I had to do. You had to do what you had to do. And I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So I've got nothing but good things to say about that guy in that regard. But litigating against a sitting judge 6 months out, and you had been on the Hugney case for a couple of years at that point. I jumped in at the last, we're on the goal line and everything like that. Like some pretty serious stuff in that first year and a half. And it's pretty cool that we had that opportunity to do that right out of the gate, right?
Yeah, and the firm that we started with there in Harrisburg, I think, provided that unique opportunity, which I think is extremely valuable. Some of the larger firms, they'll stick you in an office for 2 or 3 years, and you may see a courtroom when they tell you to run to go file something. But I think the fact is it made me, I'm sure maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but it made me a better attorney. And you had to learn, you had to figure it out, right? And you learned, especially when you go to court as often as I did, just to watch. And I thought that was important. You got in there so much, and it's not just by doing it, but I got to watch other people do it. Get there early, watch a hearing, watch how this guy did it, watch how a bunch of different attorneys do it. I think the most valuable lesson I learned, however, early in my career, if I could give any young attorneys advice, would be to be yourself and find your own way. So, for example, our former boss would write down every single question he was going to ask, right? And then he would even have like tangents. If he answers this, then we're going to go to page 3. It's like a find your own adventure book, right? I remember he used to write all those questions. So the first time I had my first serious felony jury trial, right? I did the same thing. Right? The same thing. We had another new attorney. When I say new attorney, he was my age. I don't know how I was training. He was like, you train him. I'm like, I've been doing this. Hey, what do you mean me train him? I don't know if I can train him. So we get done. I'm doing this. And then they get the surprise witness who comes in, who I'm not prepared for. Right? So the DA calls it, and I just write some notes. Right? And I got big topics. I'm like, all right, this is nonsense. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. And I remember doing it, and I sit down and I talk to the guy I was training. I said, how'd you think? He's like, that was the best witness you had the whole case. I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, can I be frank? I was like, yeah, that's why I asked you. I want you to be frank. This is how you get better. I don't want you to sugarcoat anything. He's like, the problem is when you had all the questions written down, you'd be so structured to follow that. Like the witness would give you an answer and you should have followed that. But you'd be like, oh, and then go to your next question. What you did with the witness where you only had the broad topics is you covered everything I think you needed to, but you listened to the witness. So I found that writing all the questions out individually didn't work for me, but I still do broad strokes. But that's like, you got to figure out what works for you. Certainly listen to other people, watch other people, but it's whether it's you're an attorney or anything else, you got to be yourself and figure out what works for you.
Going back to litigating and being thrown into these fires, so to speak, and thrown into these big cases. How many jury trials did you have in your first 2 years, let's say?
My first 2 years, probably 20. So yeah.
That's nuts, right?
That's nuts. There's some people.
If you're not a public, even if you're a public defender,
public defender is probably the only one. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those cases, there's a lot of DUI cases, which are always difficult because it makes you think out of the box. They're difficult to do, So, but I enjoyed that. Going to trial is what I got into the business for, right? There is nothing I enjoy more than arguing a case in front of the jury. Now, my client, most nervous time of their entire life. But for me, I'm really enjoying it and having a really good time, which is difficult to do sometimes with clients, to not let them know how much fun I'm having in court. So like, this is the most serious moment of life. You're having fun. I'm like, trust me, if I wasn't having fun, you'd be mad. Right, but
they want you to have fun.
They want me to have fun, but they don't want to see like you're enjoying it. Because I get it. It's a tough line to walk. Like, I'm really amped up. I'm ready to go. Like, I stand outside for trial. Like, I put on headphones, right? I got the workout mix going. I'm listening to the WWE entrance themes I like. I'm ready to go. Like, I'm amped up. I'm ready to go. And they're like, and then you're really having fun. So I've had that. He's like, I've had people sometimes criticize me. He's like, yeah, he was just having fun. And, this is a real serious case. I'm like, I'm not taking it any serious. It's just, do you not enjoy your job? I do. Like, this is what I want to do.
And whether they know it or not, they want you to be that way.
Yeah.
And you want attorneys who are ready to get in there and fight.
Yeah.
And you don't want somebody who's hesitant or nervous or anything like that. You want somebody who's get in there and let it fly. That's how I always feel when I'm in court with you. I don't care who's on that other side. I don't care what else is going on. We're in there and it's go time. It's like we can take on the world. You know?
It is. It's we're in there. It's go time, right? And I might give you all the hesitation I have outside. As soon as we get past the bar, which is why I call it past the bar, it's gone. Like we sit down. Everybody, all rise. I'm like, all right. You could see it like with both of us. We're shooting, we're talking junk. We're nervous. We're like, man, this case is bad. I don't know what we're going to do here. It's all rise. It's like you could do one of those wipes from TV. We're like, whoop, it's go time. Let's go.
And have you had clients who you wanted to go to trial and they didn't want to go to trial?
Yeah, lots of them. It happens all the time. But again, it's ultimately the client's decision. I think you have great cases. I think you have winnable cases. But again, at the end of the day, as I'm frank for telling clients when we're talking about, do I take this offer? Do I go to trial? You said I have a great case. You do. But at the end of the day, those 12 jurors go back. I don't know what they're going to do. And I tell clients all the time, no matter what happens, I go out the front door. You have to be comfortable with the risk that you may not before you go to trial. If you're not comfortable with that risk, you got to seriously consider the offer that the prosecutor's making.
There's risk with any trial, regardless.
Yeah, I've had cases where I can literally list off cases where I thought they were great cases where my client lost. And I can list off at least 10 cases where the jury came back, acquitted my client, and I wanted to go, are you from a different courtroom? Because I would have convicted my own guy, right? You just don't know. And I make it a habit, and I know you do too, after a jury trial, I will find a jurors and I say, hey, do you mind talking to me for a little bit? Now, can't box them in, but yeah, a lot of them will talk to you. What do you like? What do you not? What I've learned is jurors find some obscure facts sometimes, like, yeah, the cop never answered this. And I go, wow, that's really, thanks for letting me know. And then I get out to the car and I'm going, when the heck did the cop testify? And I'm paging through my notes because I don't remember that at all. I thought it was quite insignificant, and it turns out to be the most significant thing. And, you prepare all you can, but you have to understand, especially as an attorney, especially a trial attorney, that you don't know. You can do the best you can. You just don't know.
And you openly talk about you have cases that have not gone your way for criminal jury trials. A lot of people, they might not mention that. They might be hesitant to mention something like that. But you told me years and years and years ago that if you're not losing a handful, then you're really not taking tough cases. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Or you've never tried a tough case, or you've never tried a case at all. Because every attorney who actually tries cases loses. I'm famous. Like, I talked to this guy, said he never loses. I'm like, he's lying to your face. Or he's never tried a case in his entire career. He's going to say he's going to try a case, but he's trying to sell your thing all day. Because that's the only way you don't lose. You get 12 people in a box. Come on. If you don't lose cases. Listen, Johnny Cochran, one of the greatest lawyers ever. Shapiro, you can just laundry list lawyers that that are top notch. They've all lost cases. All of them.
You'd rather not do that often, but
it's going to happen. I'm not saying I'm going to lose. I don't lose 80% of them. I lose a small percentage. But do you lose, Rich? Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And you might not even think about it in this sense, but you'll have some cases where there's no offer and you have to go to trial. Yeah. Unless you're going to just plead to the information and take the worst possible scenario.
Correct.
And not go down without a fight. I think that generally people who are coming to you, they're people who don't want to go down without a fight, right?
I've run into that situation in children cases where they're accused of doing inappropriate things with kids and the defendant's older. So we get an offer, but my client's 74 years old. And the offer is, well, we'll give him 25. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, if he gets convicted, he's going to get 100. I'm like, I'll offer him 25. I'm like, you think he's living to 100? I don't understand. So, yeah, in those cases, sometimes are pretty tough.
Those are tough cases from a public perception because everybody can't stand people who harm kids and abuse kids and everything like that.
Yeah, they should rot in hell. I'm not going to defend those people. Yeah.
We agree, but when you are defending defendants of those types of cases, It's got to be a really tough spot for somebody who didn't do something like that to be accused. That must be one of the worst positions to be in because nobody wants to stand up for you. Am I right about that?
Nobody. It's the most intense jury selection because, come on. Again, I'm biased. Anybody biased against this guy? Probably, yeah. And I do this for a living. And yeah, being accused of that, again. And the most difficult thing I have ever done as a defense attorney is questioning a child witness. Because it's easy if it's an adult. If they get, difficult or obstinate or something like that, I'm just going to go at your neck, right? That's okay. Who cares? You're a grown man, grown woman, cop, whatever. But when you got a 10-year-old up there, an 8-year-old up there, and I got to demonstrate that they're lying or their mom helped them fabricate this or their father influenced them or whatever the case may be, how do I do that without being a jerk, right? Because if you can't come at the 10-year-old. I mean, you can, but then the 10-year-old's going to cry and the jury's like, I hate you. But guess what? They can't take it out on me. Who are they going to take it out on? The guy sitting next to me or the girl sitting next to me. So, that's a situation that becomes very difficult. But the difficult cases are ones that give the rise out of me. If I can, defend them, people ask me, how do you defend those people? I'm like, it's my job. It's what I do.
What do you think about innocent until proven guilty?
Well, I do. I mean, it's innocent until proven guilty. And then,
well, I know we believe in the principle and we think it's an important principle, but what do you think about how that actually plays out in the criminal justice?
Criminal justice system? It doesn't. I mean, I spend half the time educating a jury on what exactly that means. Right. That's why when prosecutors tell me I have the burden of proof and the presumption of innocence, I got so much hard work. I literally will roll my eyes at them. Like, did you roll your eyes at me? Absolutely. Because that's nonsense. Because most people think, what did he do? Why is he sitting there? Right. I tell a story all the time when people say, well, no, I think innocent to proven guilty. I go, all right, I'm going to give a scenario to me. Tell me how you react. So you're driving down the road, up on the right-hand side, you see some guy pulled over, reds and blues behind him, right? You're driving past it. The guy stopped, right? What do you think? And everybody goes, well, yeah, what did they do? I'm like, that's the wrong question. That's not what you're supposed to think. If you truly believed in innocent until proven guilty, what did he do is the wrong answer. You're already presuming he did something wrong. It's, I wonder if he did anything at all. That's the question you're supposed to ask. But people don't think that way. So when I come in, like, they have a presumption of innocence, you really got to educate the jury about what exactly that means.
So overreaction or not, innocent until proven guilty is a myth. Do you think it's an overreaction or not?
I don't know if I use a myth word, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
And practically speaking, that's not what we generally see.
No,
it's not people's general instinct.
Well, just think about on the TV, the news. Somebody gets arrested for a crime. They did it. I'm like, who cares they got arrested? Good for them.
What would you say to somebody who says, well, I have not ever been charged with a crime, and the reason for that is I've never done anything wrong. I never did anything that violates the law. So all you got to do to not get charged with a crime is don't break the law. What would you say to somebody who took that position?
Also nonsense. Also nonsense. Yeah. I mean, people don't break the law all the time, get charged with crimes all the time. I do, let's say, PICS challenges, right? Somebody gets charged with a crime. They try to buy a firearm. They're ineligible. They may have no idea. They say they have no idea. And I'll be honest with you, the vast majority of them have no idea that they're prohibited or even why they're prohibited, right? So making a mistake as that crime is defined is not a crime. But guess what? They get charged all the time. Like, I had no idea. Prosecutor's like, yeah, you did. I'm like, crime was 30 years ago. Yeah, you did. That was 35 years ago. My famous one is when they're really old crimes. I'm like, he committed that crime before you were born, buddy. Like, what are we talking about here? So, I mean, it happens all the time. People become accidental criminals, right? I talk to those people that I'm not charged with a crime. So, I've run into a lot of self-defense cases. I did nothing wrong. Why are they charging me with a crime? Well, why do they think that? Well, here's why they think that. Well, that's not true. And I go, okay. I mean, there's different perspectives on incidents, right? Self-defense is probably the biggest one. It's tough, especially in our perspective, what we do, to get those people to see why you got charged. Do I think they should be charged? No. Do I think you're guilty of a crime? No. But you got to see that perspective. Because the way I approach a case is, what is their argument going to be? Because I need to come at it that way. Can't think about what we're going to do. We got to think about where our weaknesses are first.
Yeah, for self-defense cases, you necessarily have done something that's generally a crime.
Right.
There's just a legally recognized reason why you did it.
We do that all the time where we go to seminars and I say, what's to charge you with first degree murder in Pennsylvania? You need an intentional killing of another human being, right? So with either premeditation or with the intent to kill, right? And I go, well, most self-defense is premeditated. No, even though they give me that nonsense, and intent can be formed in a second, that's nonsense, right? So, but what do they have to show? It's an intentional killing. If it's self-defense, right, you did it on purpose. You said, oh, my bad, I didn't mean to do that. You can't claim self-defense. You did it on purpose, right? So you got one. We checked that mark off, right? Now you have to have an intent to kill. Well, I was just trying to, intend himself. But under the case law, for probable cause at least, it's not a conviction, intent to kill can be shown by using a deadly weapon to a vital part of the human body. So if you shoot somebody and kill them, use a deadly weapon. We can all agree a firearm is that. And it's to a vital part of the human body because else he wouldn't be, dead, right? So that's first degree murder right there. And they're like, well, I was defending myself. I get it. That's a defense. But what you did is technically a crime. So, I mean, it's people just who are not involved in the system as regularly think that couldn't happen to them. And then when it does, inevitably, they don't understand why.
A lot of myths that people don't understand when they've never been involved in the criminal justice system. And that's what puts them at a disadvantage. They've never dealt with the system before. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like with somebody saying that I've never committed a crime and that's why I've never been arrested. It's almost like saying, well, I always follow the walk, don't walk signs and I've never been hit by a car. So if somebody got hit by a car, they must have disobeyed the sign, which is it's a logical fallacy. Another thing that we frequently hear is somebody will accuse somebody of something, they'll get arrested, they'll get charged with a crime, and they'll say, they can't do that. This is he said, she said. How often do you hear this from people? I
do. So the he said, she said is an argument. They have no evidence. I'm like, well, they're going to say what you did. Well, that's not evidence. That's literally 99% of the evidence. And then with the he said, she said thing, let's take it out of that context. I go, how many rape cases do you think there's a third party who witnessed it? It's always he said, she said. That's cases. That's certainly what it is. Well, how do they convict me? Well, they believe that person. They don't believe you. That's, it's a tough place to be in, but yeah, this guy threatened to kill me. So say you were in a neighbor dispute and you got yelled and was like, I hate you. And he calls the cops and says, he threatened to kill me. Cop listens to him. You said I didn't. They're like, you know what? We're going to figure this out. All of a sudden, again, I don't think you did anything wrong. No criminal intent. You're charged with a crime. Does that automatically mean you're guilty? Well, no, he's lying. Okay. But see, that's how easy it is to fall into the system. And people just generally don't realize that.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing that somebody's testimony is evidence. If your grandma's walking down an alley, somebody comes up from behind, beats over the back of the head and does terrible things to her. There's no cameras. There's no other witnesses. Grandma goes to the police, describes the guy. They find him. She says, yes, that's him. He did X, Y, and Z. Could you imagine if you went to court and they said, oh, well, this is he said, she said, Grandma.
You're really good with doing that. Like taking people out of their particular situation and take it to a completely different where they're going to have a different reaction. Like, like it's he said, she said, they can't charge me. Well, what if it was your wife and they were coming home and this guy beat her and raped her in an alley? No cameras, no third-party witnesses. And they said, sorry, there's not evidence. It's he said, she said.
Did you get this on tape by any chance? No? Yeah. Well, then too bad.
Did you hit the record button on your iPhone? Why didn't you do that? You shouldn't have been. Why were you trying to run? You should have been like, you know what? I don't need to run. Let me hit record. That way I have evidence. Yeah.
So that's one of the myths that we get very frequently, or the misunderstanding is more than a myth. I don't know if people are out there. They'll sometimes call it hearsay too, which isn't true.
Hearsay it's hearsay. No, it's not hearsay. Well, that's just testimony. Hearsay is you tell me something what happens and I testify, well, Mike told me that on Tuesday he was standing outside and saw X, Y. That's hearsay. If I see the car accident, that's just evidence.
Yeah, hearsay is an out-of-court statement used to prove the truth of the matter asserted. So if you're going by somebody else's statement,
correct,
that's one thing. And there are exceptions to the rules against hearsay.
We could be here all day.
We could be here for a long time. But saying what you witnessed is not hearsay. No, it's testimony and it's evidence. It might not be enough evidence to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. The trier of fact might find that it's not credible evidence, but it's certainly evidence.
It's certainly evidence.
Another thing people will say is, well, we have 3 people on my side who say it went this way, and they only have one person, so we win, right?
No, there's literally a jury instruction about number of witnesses, which is usually I put in because I never have as many witnesses as the prosecutor. And he's like, just because they said, listen, you can disprove a case based on the testimony of a single witness, and the Commonwealth can prove a case based on the testimony of a single witness. And I've had judges say, listen, here the prosecutor had, because usually it's the other way around. Prosecutor brought in 10 witnesses, defense called 2. Just because he called 10 and defense didn't call 10 doesn't mean anything. If you think those 2 witnesses from the defendant, put holes in the case to have you a reasonable doubt, that's enough for an acquittal. I don't care if she got 100 witnesses, and vice versa.
If you had 8 dirtbags who tried to pin this crime on Mother Teresa, and the 8 dirtbags all line up in court and they testify about what happened, and then Mother Teresa testifies her version of the events.
Right.
The jury doesn't have to say, oh, well, sorry, Mother Teresa.
Sorry.
You must be lying because these 8 guys
These 8 dirtbags
with rap sheets the size of phone books.
they got 8 versus 1. I learned that in 3rd grade. 8's greater than 1, right? 8 wins. That's not how it works.
I want you to, if you don't mind, tell the story about the time where the DA essentially forced you to trial when it was unnecessary and sort of taunted you. And you can use the word ass while you're talking about the communications.
Oh, yes. This was early. I was still with the first firm. So it was a DUI case. So I had a guy, he was on his way from Michigan to Maryland to live with his son. Him and his wife had a long falling out. They got divorced. He was driving down, right? So he stops at the Sheets just outside of Gettysburg. And they said he was walking funny, right? So some off-duty fire guy getting gas, he gets out of his truck. He's like blocking the driveway because he got a thing. That's probably irritated people. So he's walking funny, right? So he calls the police. Police stop him. He was going into Sheets to get water for his dog that was in the cab, funny enough. So he walks in, he comes out, and the reason he's walking funny is because, well, he had a cane, which he didn't have walking in the Sheets. So this young cop shows up, talks to him. He says, are you on some medication? He said, yeah, I take this, this, and this. He's like, I want you to do tests, blah, 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 blah. Eventually finds himself under the influence and arrests this guy. So this guy's upset with because he got his dog in the cab, let him get water. They made it real difficult for him. So we go through the case. So I talked, the guy hires me. I talked to him. He's like, I was actually pulled over for speeding like 15 minutes before I got to the Sheets. I was upset. Dog needed water. Da, 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 da. I was like, oh, really? He's like, do you have the ticket? So he gives me the ticket, and I get the trooper's name. I call the trooper, and I say, hey, I got a question. You remember this ticket? He's like, no, because they don't. You get 100 tickets a day. I said, listen, let me ask you. So let me just ask you some general questions. So how long have you been a trooper? He's like, 22 years. How many DUI arrests have you made? Blah, blah, blah. Are you familiar with people under the influence of like prescription medication, things like that? He's like, I made hundreds of arrests, blah, blah, blah. So I go through it, and I was like, so if somebody was pulled over, you thought they're under prescription medications, what would you do? He's like, I arrest them right on the spot. They're killing people, Perfect answer. I said, that's all I needed to know. And it's like, I sent him the ticket. It's like, is this your signature? Is this your ticket? He's like, yeah, that was me. I stopped him. I'm sorry, I don't remember your client in particular. I said, what you said is fine enough, right? So I get to the DA, and the DA offers like house arrest. And my client's like, yeah, I could do house arrest. Well, we can't do it in Maryland. He's got to like get a hotel room over the weekend. Guy's like, I'm not doing that. Going through it. And I said, hey, here's a sworn statement from this trooper. He pulled him over. Why don't you call him, talk to him, call him, talk to him. So the DA comes through, and I'm like, well, how about we work it out to like a general impairment, right? Where he's going to get 6 months of probation. It'll be fine. He won't lose his license, etc. Okay, great. So we get to court, and all of a sudden this deal doesn't go through. Like, no, we're not doing it. I'm like, what do you mean? So we're arguing back and forth. I'm like, this is the agreement. And he's like, you know what? You just go to trial. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to trial. I'm going to kick your effing ass. And the judge looks at me and is like, and apparently I'm loud. If anybody knows me, I can be a little loud, right? Judge goes, I assume we're going to trial? And he goes, yes, Judge. And it was Judge in Gettysburg, Judge Campbell. And I go, I assume you're pretty confident, huh? Attorney Roberts? I go, very confident, Your Honor. He goes, okay. And it was the only trial of mine. I've called the trooper. We come in. I go through the thing, called the trooper. Judge Campbell comes back and quits my client. He's like, I've never seen a defense attorney call a trooper, but that was brilliant. He's like, I don't know how you did that. I'm like, he said he got a ticket like 15 minutes before. So I put him up, and then the young cop comes in, and I asked him how much experience he has. Do you know he had a cane? No. Did you ask him if he had a cane? No. He goes through the whole rigmarole. This is why he's walking funny. They had the undercover firefighter. And I'm like, how far are you away? Do you wear glasses? It was great. And Judge Campbell acquits the guy. And my guy walks out, and I lean over in the DA's pocket. I was like, I told you I was going to kick your effing ass. You should listen to me next time. Because I never come off that confident because, again, you never know what's going to happen. But he just angered me so much. I was like, I told you, and he just looked at me. And I'm like,
It took you beyond the point of no return.
Right, because at that point, I'm like, now you're just making it personal. You're just being a jerk. Like, my guy's 68 years old. He just had a bad breakup. Like, I gave you evidence 15 minutes before. So unless you're going to show me evidence, he just started pounding prescription medication from the time he got stopped till he got the sheets, get out of here.
It'd be ridiculous too, right? Now that cop is letting me continue on down the road, let me start totally messed up. And so this is prescription medication that was in his system as per
Correct.
tests.
Going back to our prior point, talking about people who don't realize they're doing criminal activity, telling a cop when you're pulled over on prescription medication could get you in a lot of trouble. Because if they can establish that prescription medication impairs your ability to safely operate a motor vehicle, that's a DUI. No matter how lawful the prescription, you could be taking it as prescribed, following the doctor's direction, that can be a DUI. So there's another situation beyond self-defense case, prescription drug DUIs, where people find themselves on the wrong end of the law and never thought they would be.
And realistically, couldn't some people be in a position where if they don't take their medication, they're worse off than if they
That
do,
could be true.
Right?
Yeah, that's our former boss famous line. Like, do you know what it does to help them out? Yeah.
But you have people, if they're impaired to the point that it impacts their ability to drive safely.
The law says if it impairs your ability to safely operate the car.
So even if you're taking it completely as prescribed, what your doctor told you to do, if it has that impact, then it's DUI.
It is a DUI.
So if somebody is, let's say, pulled over under the suspicion of DUI, what are things they need to know to protect themselves?
When you don't have to answer any questions.
And this is Pennsylvania, just to be clear.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, don't have to answer any questions. Under no circumstances would I ever agree to a field sobriety test. Those are designed, I don't know if they're designed to make you fail, but yeah, they're going to fail. My standardized field sobriety testing I took in Georgia at 9:30 in the morning, where the only thing I had was coffee. Yeah, I fell on my face 3 times. So, I'm never taking those. And cops don't administer them correctly. And really, it's just, I think people look more ridiculous. And one of the strategies I always implore when people agree to take them is, how do they look outside the field sobriety test when they're on video? They can't walk in a straight line, do a backflip. They're not a gymnast. I'm sorry, but did they walk where they're supposed to? Yeah. When they're walking, are they okay? Yeah. They went to the back of the car, listened to instructions, and I go, that's really the thing. So I would never agree to a field sobriety test.
Is there any consequence if you refuse a field sobriety test?
No, none whatsoever.
If you refuse breath, then that's a problem.
If
right?
you refuse a breath test, you not taking a breath test can be used against you as a consciousness of guilt. A blood test can't, because the Supreme Court. The actual Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that a blood test is a search. You have a right to refuse the search, and then you can't use a consciousness of guilt instruction based on that ruling. Because, it'd be the same principle. If the cop's like, hey, can I search your car? You say no. And he's obviously hiding something. He said no. Right? But there are civil consequences. You can lose your license. You will most likely lose your license for a year for refusing to take a blood test or a breath test. A breath test, however, was dealt with in the same Supreme Court case, and because you exhale all the time, they don't consider that a search. So they can ask you to do that. If you fail to do that, same consequence with the license, but if you go to trial, the prosecutor can ask the finder of fact, whether that be a judge or a jury, to say you knew you were intoxicated. You can infer guilt because they refused to give a breath sample.
But that's not the case with the field sobriety test?
No, it's not the case. So I wouldn't take those.
No license.
Nope.
And no consciousness of guilt instruction based on that.
My experience, if a cop has pulled you out of the car on suspicion of DUI, you could do backflips like you're Simone Biles, you're getting arrested, and he's asking to take your test. I can't imagine it. I ask cops all the time, is there anybody you got pulled out of the car to do field sobriety test? You let them go? Yeah. Can you name one? I'd have to think for a while, which to me means, no.
And if you have any kind of condition that could severely impact your ability to do these things, right?
Yeah.
Like bad knees, bad back.
Officers are trained to ask, do you have any back, leg, or knee issues that can affect your ability to walk in a straight line or stand on one foot?
And so what are they supposed to do if you say yes? I've had 3 knee
Not
surgeries.
do the test.
Just not do the tests
Yeah.
at all.
And then usually the question that comes up, well, okay, I see that you tore your ACL 6 months ago, but you're like, what, halfway through recovery? Let's give it a shot and see what happens. And then inevitably on the report, they go, well, he missed his line. He couldn't stand on one foot, or something to that effect. And I go, well, was that due to his intoxication? Yeah. Well, how do you know it's not due to his injury? Well, I don't.
It would be fun if we got a bunch of the guys together and we had you run us through all the tests completely sober.
Yeah, it's difficult. They are very, very difficult.
So what are some of the challenges that you have on a day-to-day basis when you're dealing with people who've been charged with a crime for the first time? They've never been charged with a crime before. This is their first rodeo.
Understanding how the process is. I think the biggest thing is just how long it takes, right? People expect to be charged. We're going to do the thing. I get a trial next week. And then, that's not even true on a DUI case. You're probably looking at from the time you're charged to if you want to go to trial, 6 to 9 months. And then if more serious cases like, homicide or rape or something like that, you're probably looking 12 to 18 months at a minimum before you end up in court. The wheels of justice turn. They turn slow though. And it's important for people to understand that this is not something that's going to be over next week.
Do you think that's because the only exposure a lot of people have to the criminal justice system is through television, like Law and Order?
Yeah, it's not an hour.
And they got to get there in a single
episode.
So they get arrested in their trial.
I tell people to pay attention to cards on Law and Order because you look how the date really does exposure. It doesn't take an hour. If you look at it's like June 19th, this is an interrogation. Trial part 1's like, it's still pretty quick. We'd be like December. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit more realistic. But yeah, it just takes a long time. It does. And, it's a good thing, to be frank, from a defense attorney. If things moved at hyper warp speed, it makes it difficult to get a thorough investigation done. Because you have to remember, from a defense perspective, their investigation is done and completed. They have all their evidence, then they bring charges. I'm just looking, and now I'm like, oh, here's a hole here, here, here. I'd like to have an investigator. I'd like to learn more about this, and this. Like, no, you got trial tomorrow. Wait, hold on a second. So, we need to have some time. Granted, I think some of it takes too long, but what am I going to do? Court schedules are what they are. But the length of time it takes is because I'm getting it from them. We're getting it from them. We're like, what am I going to do now? When I find holes, it takes time for an investigator to get out there and do our own investigation. Unless, of course, I always tell my clients, if you just want to trust everything they did, we can just go to trial with all their evidence. And they go, no. I'm like, all right, so then calm down.
I heard this saying, or maybe it was written down in a restaurant over in Brooklyn where I grew up. Is something along the lines of, good food is not fast and fast food is not good.
There you go.
And you could apply that principle to representation, because you can have this done as quickly as possible or the right way, and very seldom will you have both, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you want to plead guilty to the information, you can get that done in a couple of weeks. Right now, that's probably the worst possible scenario for you, and a judge, if you tried to do that, would look like you were really on something, but because nobody does that, so that's the way it is. And I think, misunderstanding the process going to that is, I remember a few cases where we'll get a nice offer worked out at a preliminary hearing, right? So client's happy, avoid jail, whatever the case may be. And we got formal arraignment and we waive it and we're going to plead not guilty. They're like, hold on. I thought we were going to plead. I was like, yes, that'll be down here, right? You don't understand the process, right? Federal cases are always the worst at that because we'll have something agreed upon in a federal case and the client will have to stand up and say, I'm not guilty. And the client will look at me like, didn't we work something out with the AUSA? I said, yes, but if you tried to say guilty right now, he's like, I did it. And I go, if you say, like, what did you just say? They wouldn't know what to do, right? Because it's the process. And again, I think what's important, especially from our perspective, is talking to clients through it. And I always thank my wife for this. She goes, you have to remember that you do this 100 times a day. They've never done it before. I had a conversation with a client a couple months ago where they had a search warrant on their house And they were like, well, can they go in a safe? And I'm like, well, what are they looking for? We're looking for drugs. Okay, well, they can search anywhere where drugs are likely to be found. And he's like, that includes, I have to open a safe? I'm like, well, you don't have to. They're going to cut it open if you don't. You know, they're allowed to do that. And then they seized a phone for evidence of drug dealing. And then they asked for her passcode. I said, absolutely do not. And they said, so I don't have to give it to him? He's like, they're technically going to they can hack my phone? I'm like, yeah. Why? Because they're allowed to open it. Well, I'm like, and that's why I tell individuals who may be doing illegal things that if you got your phone locked, don't use the face or the thumbprint, because they can force you to look at it, force to give your thumbprint. They can't force you to talk the code, though.
That's kind of wild, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What's the distinction?
Expectation of privacy. So you have no expectation of privacy in your thumbprint or your face, because everybody can see it, but they can't force you to speak because you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Yeah, but with a thumbprint, you actually have to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
it's expectation of privacy.
You
it's
don't
like
have
in
any
the
expectation of privacy on your
thumbprint.
Thumbprint?
No, not
No.
unless you like took them off. Like, what was that movie where the guy took off the thumbprint? 7. Yeah, no extra, because you just let a thumbprint. You don't have an expectation of privacy.
Yeah, but shouldn't you be able to choose what you put it on?
Maybe you could, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, courts don't agree with you on that one.
Well, there's a lot of things the courts don't. Unfortunately, I've seen quite a few decisions. I'm like, how did they get to that one? Speaking of which, you're one of the few attorneys I know who's not only got a ton of trial experience, but also has had some pretty significant appeals.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat rare. Usually somebody will do one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had, really going back your entire career, the span of your career, you've done some pretty serious appeals. Why don't you tell us about some of the appeals that you've done?
Oh, I think I had one when I got into CYS. I had a doctor who was found to have abused her, or abuse by omission. Her son drowned in a bathtub when she wasn't even there. The father of the child at the time had some mental health issues. Left the child alone in the tub, and child drowned. Right, so they charged her and the basic argument was that he's got mental health issues. He must be dangerous. They appealed it to the administrative law judge, lost. We got involved for the appeal to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, who eventually reversed. And the general gist of the argument was, if you take the ALJ's decision, anybody who has a mental illness, their significant other or their, either the mother, father, or child is on notice that this person is dangerous. Because he had never done anything like that before. He never left the child alone before. There's been no issues. He left the child alone for weeks. They went out camping or whatever. No problems. And it was just an accident. And thankfully, the Commonwealth Court agreed on that one. I think the next one was a case called Kwame Barnes, where you talk about how you deal with difficult facts. So he was convicted of attempted murder. He had a relationship with this young lady and got in some sort of argument, choked her, broke her neck, stuffed her in a recycling bin, left her under a bridge in Harrisburg. So get the case. It goes up on appeal. The judge didn't merge two things. They grant it. They resentence. He sends it back up. Looking at the case then, he wants to appeal again. So I'm looking at the case and I go, wait a minute. So attempted murder in Pennsylvania has a 20-year maximum sentence. If the prosecutor can prove that serious bodily injury result from the attempted murder, it increases the penalty a maximum of 40 years. The issue is they never asked if serious bodily injury occurred as a result of the attempted murder, right? He broke her neck, but it didn't as a result. They convicted him of aggravated assault. So it's very interesting in an appeal case like that, you need to focus on not the facts, because he's a terrible guy. Don't get me wrong. He deserved 40 years. But under the Constitution, anything that increases the maximum sentence must be submitted to the jury and proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's interesting what you have to focus on in that particular case, because you have to make sure the judges and justices stay focused on the law and not the facts. Because if you focus on the facts, the guy's scumbag gets what he gets. But I get it. I was like, he's a terrible human being. Facts are terrible. I'm going to skip right over that. Here's the problem. And like, well, how are you supposed to do that? The justices are asking. I'm like, you could have done an interrogatory, or you just instruct them as an instruction, if you find, this has to happen at the end of this. And the interesting thing is the judge in that case asked 4 separate times, are there any additional instructions? All 4 times, Commonwealth said no. They had 4 separate opportunities. So they reversed that in a 9-0 decision. A little interesting side note about that is at the time, it was Judge Moulton who got appointed by the governor at that time. He was my criminal law and criminal procedure professor, was one of the judges on the bench. And he comes by, he's like, Attorney Roberts now. I'm like, oh, great. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and he was a former. But I think the most recent case I did, so that's state court case. The most recent case I did was a case before the Third Circuit involving as-applied challenges for getting your firearms rights back. In that case, our client was convicted a long time ago of some gambling-related offense in Pennsylvania. Basically, he's a bookie, right? He's taking bets. Right. Unfortunately, the same thing you and I watched some guy do on his phone as we're waiting for a bail hearing. I'm like, it's amazing how far we've come. Right. So he is ineligible to purchase or possess firearm under federal law. So we sued. Well, you sued first under an old standard, lost, call me, say, we got to get involved in an appeal. I need your help. Okay. And I go through it and you're like, wow, those are pretty good arguments. Let's do it. So we get up, we appeal it. They grant us oral argument for you and I to come up and argue. And then, the cascade again. Bruin comes down and then Rahimi comes down. So we have written more briefs for this one appeal than I've written in some. We have like 10 appeals. But we got a decision and I think it's pretty good. Although they've opened up that federal restoration, which may limit its ability, at least for now. But it says that, beyond the fact that they have to store history and tradition, you have to look at where the person is now. And judges on these as-applied challenges says you have to look at, does the individual pose a special danger of misuse of a firearm? Which I don't think lines up with the Supreme Court precedent. However, I think it allows even more people to have an as-applied challenge, especially even if you have I would say a more serious conviction. If you've demonstrated that you've been a good model citizen for 20 plus years, like, listen, I was a jerk and I threatened somebody, I did some stuff, maybe I had a gun, I didn't point it at somebody, but it was, I was 19, now I'm 49 years old, 40 years ago. I think there could be an argument, dangerous person, people get very upset, but it's 40 years ago. Does he pose a special danger of misuse now? I think it exposes more people to the ability, if they want to sue the government for the rights back.
It cuts both ways. So for people who are watching who might not be familiar with as-applied challenges, why don't you explain a little bit about what that is, how you got into it, and then some of the different types of convictions that you're challenging in these situations.
So you got me into it by bringing me into this particular case, right? So so when you challenge a statute as a constitutional statute, there's 2 ways. It's on its face or as applied. On its face is very difficult because you have to show under no circumstances can you apply the state constitutionally. And I always say, like, if Congress passes a statute says any person in the public criticizes any city member of Congress, you're guilty of a felony, you got to do a year in jail, right? That's a blatant violation of the First Amendment. You have a right to criticize and petition the government for each. There's no way you can apply that statute constitutionally. You challenge it on its face, gets struck down. Well, 922G, which says any felony greater than a year, any misdemeanor greater than 2, you're prohibited for life. Now, I think most reasonable people will say, you go out and kill 2 people and get 3rd-degree murder and you're released 40 years later, you probably shouldn't have any guns anymore, right? And Rahimi, I think, makes that clear that you can, Rahimi also says that domestic violence, at least temporarily, can be disarmed while there's an active domestic violence conviction. So, which means that statute can be applied constitutionally, at least in some contexts, which means a facial challenge is not the way you're going to go. Because the government doesn't have to point to your guy, just point any random hypothetical guy.
Worst
right?
case scenario.
Right. My guy just did a gambling conviction. They're like, well, this guy killed 6 people. We can prohibit him, right? Yes. And that's all you have to do. It has nothing to do. So what you do is, okay, I understand that we can apply this constitutionally to some people. However, my guy and his particular facts, it doesn't make any sense, right? And with Rahimi, it says, is there a history and tradition of individuals like him being permanently disarmed? So in this particular case, it was a gambling conviction. I know more about the history of gambling in the United States than I care to know, right? How it was divided up between North, Middle America, and Southern states. It was in the North, it was very Puritan. They outlawed it because it was a big vice. Middle America, where we live, Pennsylvania, was kind of hit or miss. In the South, gambling was everywhere because apparently, you couldn't buy, 50 Louis Vuitton bags. So how'd they show off they had a whole bunch of money? They bet on horse races. So I was like, I didn't know any of this. So it depended where it was. But the interesting thing was, under none of those circumstances where individuals ever stripped their firearms rights forever. In fact, most individual gamblers were not punished at all. And the bookies, like our client, who were punished, usually lost their business license or paid a fine. In only 2 circumstances, in Massachusetts, where, the Puritans first landed, and in Rhode Island, did they actually send them to jail. And in no mention did they ever say a firearm. So, okay, you didn't strip them of anything. You made them pay a fine and go home. Having, in this particular sense, that there's no history and tradition, individuals like Pistolides being stripped permanently of their firearms. And then the argument the government makes in contention was like, yeah, but we're really concerned with, organized crime. Everybody knows the movie Goodfellas or The Godfather involved in gambling. And I go, it's the same argument they make in drug-related cases, right? And they go, yeah, but in this circumstance, there's no evidence that this particular individual was dangerous. And we had in Rahimi, where there's a judicial finding of dangerousness, you can, at least temporarily in that case. And I think you could probably be safe to assume it extends it to, if you can say, but there's no judicial finding here. I go tangentially, you're probably right. But we're looking at here, which they kind of remanded in Pistolides for. Does he pose a special danger of misuse? Which I think allows them to go back and say, is he dangerous now? Which I think be a win for us, because he hasn't been in any, he's never done any violent crime whatsoever. It's gambling, whatever. And I go, you get to the point now where, like, again, what he's being accused of, people doing on their phones all the time. And in fact, when I go home to watch football this weekend, I'll probably see 1,000 commercials of gambling.
Right.
Just download right now. We'll give you $50 in free bets. So
what other types of crimes are you challenging? Convictions are you challenging in your as applied challenges? Because you get several of them going.
Yeah, DUI. I have tax evasion, which will be interesting because I don't know what's more American than not paying your taxes, but they have a history of stripping people of their firearms rights for not paying taxes. I'm like, well, they threw tea in the river, so in the harbor. So DUIs, I have tax evasion, I have...
and the tax evasion was really a very, very minor case.
Yeah,
right?
It was. He didn't pay like $1,000 in taxes. They were looking at the place he was working and getting cash on the table for something different. He just got caught up in working at a bad place.
It's like the Capone type thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he didn't, from what he tells me, he didn't know anything. But you're not going to jam him up. So DUIs, tax evasion... We have the gambling case, and then there's one more that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But usually it's nonviolent crimes. When this first happened, I really turned away a lot of people who had really violent crimes because I didn't think that those posed a real avenue to success. And, I've been proven right. A lot of serious violent crimes. Some where there's threats of violence are okay. But, it's just something I tried to stay away from. Because, again, as an attorney, I want to try to make sure I can at least give a hope of success. If, I'll tell a client $1 million in one shot, I'll take $1 million in one shot, but you're going to know.
Right. And we're really not in the business of taking somebody's money to waste their time.
Yeah.
If you want to pay somebody to waste your time, there's plenty of attorneys out there you can find.
And just from a selfish concept, I don't want to take a bad case and get bad law, and then it affects the people who I really think have a legitimate shot.
Well, that's a very important point because bad cases make bad law. Kind of like what you were talking about. It seems like you were fortunate in that appeal that it went your way.
Right.
But that could have very easily have not only gone the other way, but created a
terrible
bad standard. Because they're like, okay, we are certainly not going to rule in favor of this human piece of garbage.
Yeah, who he was.
And so how do we twist and turn the law to create a standard that doesn't give him relief? And we see that a lot, don't we?
We do, and that's always a scary thought. Bad fakes make bad laws, a famous lawyer phrase, and it's absolutely true. And that's why it's very difficult. And, while I say we miss Justice Scalia, because he, for all his conservative leanings, not all of which I agree with, he was a criminal defendant's best friend. And Judge Gorsuch is taking up that kind of mantle now, although the rest of the right side of the court is not so forgiving. And I think that's what happens. Because, why are we protecting these criminals? They're criminals. Why are we protecting them? Why do we suppress this evidence? Why do we not let cops just kick in the front door? I go, well, there's reason for it. It's like, you're protecting criminals. And I go, Well, yeah, you're probably right, but that's the idea. You got to limit the power of government because, again, I think, and I don't really like slippery slope arguments. If you start chipping away at that, then maybe it's not the criminals who come next.
Right. If they set that standard, then it's going to apply to you.
Right.
It's easy to say that when
I'm
it's
not a
not
criminal.
happening to you. Yeah. It's easy to say that when it's not happening to you. And then when people end up in that situation, they seem to have a completely different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. They do. And then everybody's crying about their rights. And I go, weren't you the guy last week who told me it didn't matter because you weren't in trouble ever?
This was a lot of fun. I could frankly do this for hours and hours. We always have a great time when we're talking out. Even after all these years, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2, part 3, part 4.
No, you
whatever.
never invite me, Mike. It's okay.
I
We only
invite you all the time.
work together every day. I don't understand. I'm
Every
very
single
difficult to
day.
get a hold of. I understand, Mike.
It's not
Very
like I
difficult.
talk to you every single
Not like
day.
I talk to you at least twice a day.
Oh, let's do this again soon. I think this is the first time we've sat down in person and done this in all these years, done a bunch of stuff virtually. But I had a lot of fun. Hopefully you did. Anything you want to leave our audience with before we go?
Lawyer up and shut up.
Lawyer up and shut
Shut
up.
up. I love it.
And get yourself a shirt if, in case people can't see because the way we're sitting. It says lawyer up and shut up on the back. And we've had a bunch of people reach out. We'll get people some shirts. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks
I really
for having me,
appreciate
Mike.
it. We miss you, Ellie. Daddy loves you. Thanks for tuning into the Mike G and the Garbage Gang podcast. If you want to be a proud member of the Garbage Gang, we need you to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out one of the recommended videos, and comment. Tell us what you think. We love having you as a member of the Garbage Gang. We'll see you next time.